Enjoy listening. Nadezhda always considered herself lucky. She had Igor, a husband one could only dream of, caring, attentive, with a good job at an IT company. They met at university there, when she was studying economics and he was studying computer science. 2 years later they had a modest wedding, and a year later their son, Kiryusha, was born. After maternity leave, Nadezhda planned to return to work. Her career as an economic analyst, which she began immediately after university, promised to be successful. But little Kiryusha was often ill, and his return to work had to be postponed. Irina Stanislavovna, Igor's mother, initially seemed like the perfect mother-in-law. She helped with the renovations in their new apartment, a gift of hope from their parents, gave them expensive gifts, and offered to babysit Kiryusha. But after the birth of their grandson, something changed. At first, these were minor criticisms. "Nadia, you're holding the baby wrong," Irina Stanislavovna would say, taking her grandson away. "Let me show you later." Advice on cleaning, cooking, and even how to fold laundry followed. Nadezhda tried to ignore it. Ultimately, she was grateful for the help with the baby when she needed to run to the store or meet friends. But one day, Nadezhda accidentally overheard her husband's phone conversation with her mother-in-law. "Igor, your wife is a parasite. She sits at home with the baby and does nothing." Irina Stanislavovna's voice rang with indignation. "You work like crazy, and all she knows is how to spend your money." Nadezhda froze, a cup of tea in her hand. The apartment was spotlessly clean. Dinner was already on the stove. The laundry was drying on the balcony, and the baby was sleeping peacefully in his crib after she spent the whole night soothing his colic. "Mom, Nadia's doing well," Igor answered hesitantly. "Kiryusha is still little, he needs his mother. All women work with children, and she's found herself a cushy spot. When I was her age, I worked and kept house and raised you, and every day she has a new dress or shoes." Nadezhda put down her cup. The last time she bought a new dress was 6 months ago, when she was getting ready to leave the hospital. All she spent was money on groceries, diapers, and medicine for Kiryusha, who was just starting to recover from another cold. That evening, she tried to talk to her husband. "Igor, I accidentally overheard you talking to Mom. Do you really think I'm not doing anything?" Igor looked away. "Of course not. Mom's just worried that it's hard for you to be alone with the baby. She's offering help. Offering help while calling me a parasite." Nadezhda tried to speak calmly. "You misunderstood. She's just worried." Igor buried his face in his phone, signaling the end of the conversation. From that day on, everything began to change. Igor started asking what Nadezhda spent her money on, checking the store receipts. A wrinkled face at the sight of a new jar of baby food. "You can't make your own puree, do you have to buy it ready-made?" he asked, pointing to a 120-ruble jar. "Igor is a special hypoallergenic formula prescribed by the pediatrician," Nadezhda explained. "I cook everything I can, but some things you have to buy. And my mother cooked everything herself. And it's okay, I grew up healthy," Igor snapped. Irina Stanislavovna now came every 2 or 3 days, ostensibly to help with her grandson. In reality, she monitored Nadezhda's every move, reporting any violations to her son. "Igor, do you know how much your wife spends on those expensive cosmetics?" she hissed one day while Nadezhda was putting Kiryusha to bed. I looked into the bathroom. There were jars worth several thousand. Nadezhda couldn't take it anymore. "Irina Stanislavovna, it's just regular baby cream and shampoo. And my most expensive cosmetics are just a 400-ruble foundation that I bought before I was pregnant." "Don't be rude to your elders," my mother-in-law snapped. "Igor, do you see how she's talking to me?" Igor looked down guiltily. "Nadia, why are you being so rude? Mom only wants the best." Nadezhda realized the situation was becoming unbearable when her husband started giving her grocery bills down to the ruble, demanding change and receipts. "I don't understand why milk costs 89 rubles. It's 85 at the store next door," he'd say, examining the receipt. "Because at the store next door it's watered down, and the expiration date is only 2 days," Nadezhda replied wearily. And this is farm food, better for the child. We're not millionaires to overpay for every little thing, Igor snapped, clearly hearing it from his mother. One morning, when Kiryusha was 18 months old, Nadezhda made a decision. She called her former boss and learned of a vacancy at the company. The salary was lower than before maternity leave, but it was a start. "I'm going back to work," she announced to her husband over dinner. "Starting Monday." Igor raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What about it, Kiryusha?" "I made arrangements with a private daycare not far from the office. I'll drop him off on my way to work." "Daycare costs money," Igor frowned. "And my mother can babysit him for free." "No," Nadezhda said firmly. "The kindergarten is already paid for a month in advance." "With what?" Igor was indignant. "Where did you get the money?" "I sold the gold earrings my parents gave me for my 18th birthday." Nadezhda shrugged. "My earrings, my decision." Igor was silent for a long moment, and then smiled uncertainly. "Well, if you want to work, Kiryusha is already a big boy, I guess it's time." Just a week after returning to work, Nadezhda realized that her salary alone wouldn't be enough. Daycare, travel, lunches. All of this consumed almost her meager salary. And her husband, instead of supporting her initiative, began giving her even less money for expenses. "But you work now," he shrugged. "She must contribute to the family." Irina Stanislavovna never missed an opportunity to add fuel to the fire. "What kind of mother abandons a child at this age?" she loudly protested during every visit. "The child needs a mother, not some strange women at the daycare center." Then Nadezhda found a second job, a remote one. In the evenings, after Kiryusha was already asleep, she sat down at her laptop and processed data for an analytics company. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough to make ends meet. Now she left home at 7 a.m. and returned at 6 p.m. She'd pick up Kiryusha from daycare, cook dinner, play with her son, put him to bed, and then work freelance until 10-11 p.m. exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. She barely found time to shower, let alone do any personal care. But she didn't complain. Her independence was at stake. After a month of this life, something unexpected happened. Irina Stanislavovna showed up at their home with a pie and a disgruntled expression. "Nadezhda, what's going on?" she began from the doorway. "Igor says, you're hardly ever home." "I'm working, Irina Stanislavovna, just like you wanted," Nadezhda replied calmly, finishing up a report for her second assignment. "But the child and the husband, who takes care of them?" "The child is in kindergarten until 6. Then I'm with him, and my husband, a grown man, takes care of himself." Igor, returning from work, found his mother and wife in tense silence. "What happened?" he asked, kissing his mother on the cheek. "Igor, your wife doesn't care about you at all," Irina Stanislavovna began. "Look how thin you are, your shirt is wrinkled, and the child is in daycare all day." Nadezhda stood up silently and went into the kitchen. She was tired of arguing, tired of trying to prove herself, tired of everything. Half an hour later, when her mother-in-law had finally left, Igor came into the kitchen. "Maybe you should work less," he asked hesitantly. "Mom says Kiryusha needs more attention." Nadezhda slowly raised her head from her laptop. "Igor, do you remember that 3 months ago your mother called me a parasite for staying home with a child? And now I'm a bad mother because I work." She smiled bitterly. "Just decide what you want from me." Igor scratched his head in confusion. "But what is she just worried about?" "About the fact that I'm no longer asking you for money. About paying for daycare and buying Kiryusha clothes myself. Or about how I don't have time to listen to her lectures." "Nadia, don't start. No, don't start." Nadezhda slammed the laptop shut. "Do you know how much I earn now? Almost as much as you. And yet I still take care of the child, cook and clean. And you don't even put your dishes in the sink." Igor was taken aback. He had never seen his quiet wife like this. "I thought you were working part-time somewhere." "I'm working part-time somewhere. And then I pick up our son from kindergarten, do his English lessons with him, cook dinner, wash your socks and iron your shirts. And all this after 10 hours of work." Igor remained silent, and hope continued. And you know what's the funniest thing? When I was a parasite, staying home with a child and only taking care of the house in Kiryusha, I was a bad wife to your mother. Now that I work like a horse at 2 jobs, I'm a bad mother. Do you think I'll ever be able to please Irina Stanislavovna? Mom just wants to control our lives. Nadezhda finished for him, and she's doing a great job of it, thanks to you. She got up and went to her son's room. Kiryusha was already asleep, his hand under his cheek. Nadezhda carefully adjusted the blanket and wiped away the tears that had suddenly welled up. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange tension. Igor stopped airing his mother's complaints, but he didn't side with his wife either. He seemed to be watching from the sidelines, hesitant to make a choice. And then the unexpected happened. Nadezhda received a call from her first job offering her a promotion. A senior analyst position with a salary 1.5 times higher. You're doing the best job in the department, her boss said. We want you to lead a new project. That same evening, she received a large freelance contract, so good that she could have quit her day job. But Nadezhda decided to take a chance and accept both offers. This meant even less free time, but it gave her financial independence. When she told Igor about this, he was surprised. Are you sure you can handle it? It's a lot of work. I can handle it, Nadezhda said firmly. But I'll need help with Kiryusha. You can pick him up from kindergarten twice a week. Igor nodded hesitantly. Probably if they let me go at work. It became clear in the first week that Igor couldn't be relied on. He forgot to pick up their son twice, and Nadezhda had to cancel important meetings. But something had changed. She was now earning significantly more than her husband. And this hadn't escaped Irina Stanislavovna's attention. Igor said, Your salary has been raised, she began during their next visit. That's good. But who's looking after Kiryusha while you're building your career? Professional teachers at the best private kindergarten in town, Nadezhda replied calmly. Which, by the way, I pay for in full. Money can't replace a mother's love, the mother-in-law protested. I agree, Nadezhda nodded. That's why I devote all my free time to my son, and don't go around making pies and giving advice. Irina Stanislavovna choked with indignation. Igor, can you hear how she's talking to me? Igor, sitting next to her, sighed. Mom, let's not argue. Nadia works a lot, it's hard for her. But it was easy for me, Irina Stanislavovna snapped. I work too, but I found time for the child, my husband, and the house. You had a housekeeper paid by Grandpa, Igor suddenly said. I remember Aunt Zina, who cooked and cleaned while you and Dad worked. My mother-in-law trailed off. Well, that was a completely different time. Times are always different, Nadezhda said calmly. But for some reason, 3 months ago you thought I was a parasite for staying home with my child, and now I'm a bad mother because I work. A funny contradiction, don't you think? A heavy silence fell over the room. Nadezhda stood up. Excuse me, I need to finish the project. Have a nice evening. She went into the bedroom and closed the door. 15 minutes later, the front door slammed. Irina Stanislavovna left. A few minutes later, Igor entered the bedroom. Why are you doing this to Mom? He asked, but without his usual forcefulness. And how should it be? Nadezhda looked up from her laptop. She's been trying to destroy our family for 2 years, and I'm supposed to smile and say thank you. She's not trying to destroy it. No. What do you call it when she turns you against me? I'm either a bad wife or a bad mother, a spendthrift or a careerist, and every time you take her side. Igor sat on the edge of the bed. I don't take her side. She's just my mother and I can't. Can't you say no to her? Can't you protect your family, or don't you want to? Igor was silent for a long time. You know, he finally said, when you started working I thought you'd quickly give up, go home and sit with Kiryusha like before because it was more convenient. Because I'm used to you always being home, having dinner ready when I arrive, having the house tidy. And now I see how much you do and I'm ashamed that I'm not helping. Nadezhda closed the laptop. Igor, I'm not asking you to choose between me and your mother. I'm asking you to protect our family, me and Kiryusha. Because if you don't, one day you'll have to choose. And then I'm not sure I'll choose to stay. Igor turned pale. Do you want a divorce? I want my husband to be on my side, not his mother's side. I want respect, I want trust. And if I can't get that in marriage, then why do I need this marriage? Nadezhda didn't raise her voice, but every word hit the mark. Igor looked at her as if for the first time. I don't want to lose you, he said quietly. Neither you nor Kiryusha. Then prove it. The next day, Igor got up earlier than usual and made breakfast. Unskillfully but diligently. Nadezhda looked in surprise at the burnt pancakes and overly strong coffee. What's this? She asked, smiling. The beginning of a change, Igor answered seriously. I'll call Mom and tell her we can't come see her this weekend. Nadezhda raised an eyebrow. And where are we going? To the water park. Kiryusha has been asking for a long time. And I kept putting it off. It was a small step, but a significant one. That evening, Igor picked up his son from kindergarten himself, cooked dinner from pre-cooked food, and even started the washing machine. Although he hung the shirts incorrectly and left the pan unwashed, Hope was touched by his efforts. But the real test awaited them a week later, when Irina Stanislavovna came to visit again, this time uninvited. I couldn't get through to Igor, she explained, walking into the apartment. She decided to stop by and check on him. Igor, he's at practice with Kiryusha, Nadezhda said. They'd signed up for karate. Karate at 5 years old. Her mother-in-law shook her head. He's still little. Perfect for a children's group. Nadezhda shrugged. Would you like some tea? Her mother-in-law narrowed her eyes suspiciously. Something's happening. Igor's been calling less often. He's refusing to come over on weekends. Something's happened to him. Nadezhda calmly put the kettle on. Nothing but the truth. I'm tired of being bad in every role, be it housewife or working mother, and I won't let anyone bully me anymore and turn my husband against me. How dare you? Irina Stanislavovna snapped. I'm not bullying anyone. I just want the best for my son and grandson. No, you want to control our family and used me as a convenient target. When I was sitting at home with Kiryusha, you called me a parasite. Your wife is a parasite. She sits at home with the child and does nothing, Nadezhda repeated. I heard you say that to Igor on the phone. More than once. Irina Stanislavovna turned pale. It's taken out of context. I just thought it would be easier for you if anything happens. If my husband reproaches me for every penny, if I feel like a parasite in my own family, I never will. And now that I work 2 jobs and earn more than your son, I've suddenly become a bad mother, Nadezhda continued. I wonder what you'd say if I left Igor, that I abandoned him or that I freed him from a burden. At that moment, the front door opened, and a breathless Kiryusha in a kimono ran into the apartment, followed by Igor. Mom, he asked, surprised to see his mother. What are you doing here? I came to check on you, Irina Stanislavovna said, confused. You weren't answering your calls. I was at practice with my son. Igor took off his jacket. We go to karate every Wednesday now. Grandma. Kiryusha ran up to hug his grandmother. And I already know how to do a handstand. Irina Stanislavovna automatically hugged her grandson, but kept her eyes on her son and daughter-in-law. Mom, we need to talk, Igor said seriously. Kiryusha, go change and wash your hands. Okay. When the child ran off to his room, Igor sat down opposite his mother. I know you talked about Nadia before when she was babysitting Kiryusha, and now when she's working. Igor, I'm just worried. No, Mom, you're not worried, you're interfering and this has to stop. Irina Stanislavovna looked at her son, dumbfounded. You're choosing her side. I'm choosing my family, Igor said firmly. Nadia and Kiryusha are my family, and I won't let anyone, not even you, destroy what's dear to me. His mother-in-law pursed her lips. After everything I've done for you, you raised me, and I'm grateful. But that doesn't give you the right to control my life or insult my wife. If you want to be a part of our lives, you'll have to respect my wife and accept that the most important decisions in our family are Nadia and I, not you." Tears filled Irina Stanislavovna's eyes, either from hurt or shock. "I always wanted the best," she whispered. "I know," Igor said more softly. "But sometimes the best thing to do is simply support and not interfere. My mother-in-law is up. I need to think," she said and headed for the exit. At the door, she paused and turned to Nadezhda. "Forgive me if I was unfair." It wasn't a full-fledged apology, but for Irina Stanislavovna, it was still a big step. When the door closed behind her, Nadezhda walked over to her husband and hugged him. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Igor hugged her back tightly. "For standing up for our family." 5 years had passed. Much had changed in Nadezhda and Igor's family. Kiryusha started school, and he had a younger sister, Polina. Nadezhda became the head of the analytics department, and then opened her own consulting company. Igor supported her venture and even helped with the technical aspects of the business. Her relationship with Irina Stanislavovna also changed. After that memorable conversation, she remained distant for a long time, resentful of her son. But when Polina was born, maternal feelings prevailed over her pride. She called Nadezhda and offered to help. "If you need time for your business, I could babysit," she said hesitantly. "Only if you don't mind, of course." Nadezhda agreed, and gradually a respectful, if not close, relationship developed between them. Her mother-in-law no longer called Nadezhda a parasite or a bad mother. On the contrary, she proudly told her friends about her daughter-in-law, an entrepreneur who managed both her business and her children. "She's simply wonderful," Irina Stanislavovna said, though she sometimes added, "But without my help, of course, it would have been difficult for her." Nadezhda only smiled, hearing these words. She learned to accept her mother-in-law as she was, with all her flaws and virtues. There were no more fights over money or reproaches in their home. Igor learned to help his wife with the children and around the house. And Nadezhda realized that strength doesn't come from doing everything on your own, but from being able to ask for help and accept it.